Today, I just wanted to talk about earning the title before you have the title. So, Misty Lee, maybe tell me, I know Joey's on some of the group chats, but who else is like in that middle management spot in this room? Yeah, raise your hand if you're a closer. Okay, what about, so everyone else is setters? Awesome. So first thing I want to say, in my opinion, solar money is so good, it doesn't matter if you're a setter or a regional manager, everyone has the opportunity to make fantastic money. Morgan and I was selling about 8 or 10 a week in Vegas. In 2016, I'd made $200 a kilowatt. And I was knocking the door, going back and selling it, and then updating the customer to get it installed. And I was making $200 a kilowatt. So solar money has changed, right? So you guys have the opportunity, doesn't matter where you're at, to go make fantastic money. But what I was asked to talk about, I trained this in, so you guys are kind of getting a little bit of higher level stuff. Who knows what NLU is? What is it?
Notorious Leadership University.
Okay.
That's something we do every Monday. We get on a Zoom call and hear from one of our leaders, like Austin or Morgan or Lee, and they put together. So this was what you trained on in the first few weeks.
So it's kind of a higher level stuff. They Seth and Cam went through it, and they're like, anyone with more than X amount of installs is in this program, and anyone that's not is not. And it's been interesting. The calls they're tough, man. It's an hour long, and you're driving. It's at noon, and like life's happening, and you know what I mean? Like it's a lot of energy. So you guys are kind of getting a glimpse into stuff that I feel like maybe 12 people have been a part of. So I trained on earning the title before you have the title. And what I mean by that is if you're a setter, you're not yet a closer, what's the mentality that you need to have right now to be a closer in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever your plan is. And if you're a closer, what mentality do you need to have to go be a manager? And if you're a manager, what does it look like to go be a regional and so forth, right? Because there's a certain way I feel like we have to act, and there's certain traits that we have to act or look for. So raise your hand and just be open. What is one word you guys feel like that Legacy or Notorious is looking for in a leader? If you had to put it in a word. So I just kind of put some random ones on here. Consistency, authentic, humility, which I actually think you guys get probably the best I've seen at it with Lee, as much as you see him, right? He's really humble, and he's an open book, right? He'll tell you anything you need to, anything about him. I think one that gets missed is purpose. Like, what is your purpose every day? You guys are here. It's 11:12 in the morning on a Wednesday. But what's the true purpose? Why are we here, right? In other words, are disciplined. I think that's a really big one. Lee's asked me to do this talking head thing, and I go to record it, and I just can't figure out how to make it look good. But he's asked me to talk about what I think separates a good rep and a bad rep. I have one word, and it's discipline. If you can get up every day and do something that absolutely sucks ass every day, but you get up the next day to do it, eventually it doesn't suck ass anymore, right? So those are just some words, but some stuff that I came up with is decisiveness. So whether you're a setter, closer, manager, regional, it doesn't matter. We have to be decisive. Anyone want to share what they think I mean by decisive?
Making a decision and not turning back from it.
Awesome. What else? What else can we dive into with that? Okay, so it's all kind of right? I think sometimes we get paralysis by analysis. Have you guys heard that term before? So I read this quote, and it's like, good leaders make decisions with 65% information. That's it. Like, they don't need a ton of it to make a decision. And if you guys have been around people like that, I like to say I'm like that. Like, my wife hates me for it because I'm like, yeah, let's do it. She's like, well, you don't even know. I'm like, cool, sounds good, let's do it. Like, I don't care. Like, we'll figure it out as we go, you know? So I would say decisiveness, but more importantly, decisiveness on what you're choosing to do, right? So if today the goal is to go get 3 power bills, like, decide you're doing that, and then don't back down until it happens. And guess what? If you come up short with 2, so what? At least you gave the mindset and the effort to get 3 today, right? And if it's, hey, I'm going to go be with my family this weekend, then go be with your family that weekend and be all in on it. But decide to do it and sign up for it and see it through. I think that's the number one trait that I could say has made me somewhat successful, is that I just didn't ever quit. Things have been really shitty, and they're probably going to get shitty again, but just don't ever quit. The next one is thoughtful. As a leader, why is thoughtfulness important? Any thoughts on that? I really like that. So I got this one. Who has heard of the book called Endurance? About a ship that got frozen in the ocean, besides Morgan? So the captain was named Ernest Shackleton, and they were doing an expedition. Long story short, the waters froze, and the boat literally froze into the ocean. And they had lots of crew members on there, and not one of them died. They made it out. They got out of there. Everyone survived it, but it was through thoughtful leadership. It was through discipline, and more importantly, that the leader didn't do anything, or he didn't ask for anything to be done that he wasn't willing to do himself. So I think thoughtfulness is really important, right? So if you're a setter, and right now if you're a setter, the number one goal is to do what? Set bills. Do you think you can be a regional manager if you've never set a bill before? Can you be a closer if you don't know how to set, right? So don't look at it as like, oh, I'm a setter, I just show up, that's all I do. Everyone else gets recognized for it. I actually think the setters are the most important people in the entire company. You learn the most as a setter on sales ability. As you graduate, you learn on other things. Closer, you learn, I think probably the most overlooked thing you learn is how to be an actual human being with people. Do you stop by at install day? Do you send them a thank you card? Do you make sure that they're taken care of? And then as a leader, you learn way more about stuff that you're not ready for as a setter, right? So it's graduation programs. The next one, and Lee kind of mentioned this, but I think a word is human. Why do we think that's important? Or maybe you guys don't, but why would the word human be important? Is as you're growing. So I got this, who knows of the name Dick Cheney? Okay? You probably know, depending on what political side you're on, it doesn't matter to me. You either know him for starting the war in Iraq, or you either know him for like starting the war in Iraq, depending on which side you want to go, right? But Dick Cheney was a Republican vice president. His daughter was also gay. So for those that know, like Republican and that side don't usually align, right? But he was human enough to say, I love my daughter and I support her. So I'm a Republican, but I like gay people too. Which is pretty cool, right? So as a leadership, I think humanism is the word I'm going to use, is extremely important to understand because, and I don't know your guys' group at all, but I know my group, we have guys, and I can say this, that probably do a lot of drugs and spend too much money gambling, but they sell solar and they're nice to my kids. So I don't care what they do on their time. Obviously, I want them to change their lifestyle, right? Then I have people that are super like, they go to church, they make sure their lawn, like everything's handled that way, but then they kind of struggle on the other side of stuff, right? All I care about is what's inside that human, and I think that's really important as a leader to start learning and as a setter right now. So a lot of us start as strangers. My challenge to you guys, whether you're a setter, closer, manager, going to be a regional, is get to fall in love with people. Get to spend time with people. Ask them about them. When guys are coming to meeting, you can tell they're not having the best day. Guys, girls, come to meeting, ask them. Make sure they know you're there for them, because I promise that 15 minutes of conversation will be the reason that person comes back tomorrow. It'll be the same reason that person sells 3 this week. It's going to be the same reason that person goes and recruits 5 more people. Because when people feel loved and accepted, growth just expands, right? So the last thing I kind of wanted to cover, so those are 3 thoughts and 3 actions that you can do each and every day that are going to help you start earning the title before the title. So why is that important though? If you're a setter right now and you want to be a regional, but you don't give a shit about your next door neighbor, do you think anyone's going to want you to be a leader? If you're a shitty human being, but you can sell 5 accounts a week, do you think anyone cares about you? Right? So we have to start thinking ahead. Start thinking ahead. Think as if I was a regional manager, would I hug everyone when they came into my correlation? Would I send them birthday cards? Would I make sure that their wives had flowers when they had babies? What would you be doing as that regional manager? That's the way you should act now. So to kind of solve or finish this up, the last thing I want to talk about, so I don't want to take too much of your time and Morgan's going to go, is you have to identify your identity. So I talked about purpose in the beginning. I think when we start selling, it's all because we want to make money. Who is in here for any reason besides they heard you make good money selling solar? To start. No one signs up for this because like, hey man, we're really cool, but you make like $7.25 an hour. You're like, oh, that's badass. I want to do it. It's like, hey, we're really cool, but you can make 300 grand. You're like, oh, that's even better, right? Or whatever the number is. But once that number is hit, or once that lack of money or whatever happens goes away, what's the real purpose? Why do you get out of bed every day? Why do you get out of bed and show up to here? So I really, really like identifying your identity. So this is a quote: a personal mission statement is a statement that reflects your purpose, values, goals in life. It helps you clarify your priorities, stay focused on what matters, and make decisions that align with your values. So how to get your identity and purpose in line is, one, you have to reflect on what your values are. What makes you you? And just because mine or Lee's or Misty's or Morgan's or whoever's might be high integrity doesn't mean that has to be yours. Doesn't mean that's the number one thing you think of. So as you guys do this, and I challenge you all to do this, setter, closer, manager, doesn't matter who you are, I challenge you to identify what your identity is. And the best way I think to do it is you go home and you write down your obituary. You write your own obituary as if you were to die today. What would people say about you? What would you want them to say about you? Would the message say, he was a little bitch and a cheater? Or would it say, this guy was loyal, he loved his family, worked to death, like took care of everyone around his life, was a great human, helped his neighbors, whatever that story is. You write your story. That'll help you with your values. The second thing is, I think you need to identify what gets you most excited in life. So Lee's talked about that one, right? The next one, define your purpose. This one's really easy. So as you write your obituary, this will go hand in hand. What do you want to be remembered for? So our region is reading a book right now called Driven. It's a biography on Larry H. Miller. He was the former owner of the Utah Jazz. His wife, Gail, sold it to Ryan Smith, who spoke to us at Legends Night. Larry H. started as a parts manager at a car dealership, built a corporation that does over $3.5 billion in sales. Started as a parts manager because he had a really, really, really big purpose. So what do you want to be remembered for? The next thing I would say is, after you do that, craft your mission statement. That is something that you said, this is who I am. This is what I identify as. And it can be 40 sentences long. It can be 3 words. It doesn't have to be super detailed. I would just say, okay, for like me, it's like, have a purposeful life, have a meaningful life, impact others. That's really simple, right? I would do that with your personal. I would do that if you're in a relationship with your spouse, so you guys both have a mission statement. And I would do one with your family if you guys have kids. Something that you can tell your oldest son when he leaves the house, hey, who are we? What do we do, right? The next one is refine it and revise it, and then be okay when it changes, because change will happen, right? As a setter, the purpose is different than as a regional manager, right? I think the biggest thing that holds us back is we write down a goal to make $100,000, and we either hit it or we don't, but we're not willing to adjust it. We're not willing to adjust because we're so stubborn on what that goal says. So be okay when change happens. I promise you solar is going to change again. I promise you something's coming again that's going to change it. I think there's a new Senate bill, right, Misty? A new Senate bill in Nevada that's getting talked about today? Yeah. Right? So there is, and I think it's good. I think it's coming, and I think it's going to be really good. Yeah, but change is coming. And then guess what? I promise you in 6 years it's going to change again. And I promise you your life's going to change. Your wife's going to change. Your mentality is going to change. I'm just telling you it's okay to change. I've seen a lot of people come into this industry that are like, I have to make $100,000. So they go and do it. And then they're not willing to adjust their life and say, okay, I'm worth more than that. They end up quitting because all they end up doing is working for $100,000. They have no purpose after that. So change your purpose, identify with something different, be okay with growth, be okay with it. Lastly, the last thing I want to talk about is just lead by example. No matter what you do, setter, closer, regional, dad, husband, wife, son, daughter, does not matter. If you can set that tone that no matter what role you're playing in that moment, lead by example with it, leadership and acting as if will follow you.
My name's Morgan. I'm from a small town in Utah. I grew up in a town of, well, I didn't grow up in a town. I grew up on a little tiny farm outside of a town of like 250, 300 people. So I'm from central Utah. I'm from a tiny town. And everybody's farmers or they work for the government. My parents are both school teachers. We lived a very good life, but we had absolutely no money. I have 3 brothers. I have an older brother and I have 2 younger brothers, okay? So my parents both worked, and I had everything I needed, and I had nothing extra unless I went out and earned it. So as a boy, I had a job. I lived by a fishing resort. So I'd go out every night into the farm fields, and I'd get on my hands and knees, and I'd pick night crawlers. I'd put them in a 5-gallon bucket, and then I'd put them in a fridge, and the next morning I would count them. And we'd sell them by the tens of thousands of night crawlers. And that's how I bought my first dirt bike, is I picked enough night crawlers to buy a dirt bike. At probably like 12, I started my first business. My brothers and I, we mowed like 40 lawns. We did that all summer long. After that, my grandparents owned a construction company. So from the age of 14, you can work federal jobs if your family owns the company. So I was 14 years old. It's 120 degrees, some of these spots in Utah, and I'm out building fence with 50-year-old grown-ass men. And I learned to work really, really hard. We'd do 60 hours a week, and I missed baseball, and I missed football, and I missed all those things because I was working, because if I wanted anything extra, I had to go earn it, okay? So as a boy, I learned to work really hard, but I was never around anyone that made great money. A lot of people think working hard is the only thing it takes to make great money. Well, I can take you and show you lots of guys with bent up fingers and fingers cut off and broken legs because they've worked really hard their whole life. They don't have one thing to show for it. But does anybody make great money without working hard? Unless it's a Ponzi scheme, and usually those guys work pretty hard too, honestly. So I learned to work hard as a boy, right? And then at 18, I got shipped off to England, and I lived in England for 2 years where I served a church mission. It was a service mission. And I learned to give, and I learned to play full out, and I learned to just be about other people. And that really changed my perspective on life. I realized that life is a lot more than focusing on yourself. And this was at 18, right? I was a kid. I lived with my buddies. We lived in England, and it was awesome. It was the best 2 years of my whole life. I mowed people's lawns. We helped a lot of people. Like, it was just about service. Okay, and that has had a huge influence on what I do on a day-to-day basis now in this job. I come home from my mission, and I'm 20 years old. I have no education. I have no skill set. I'm really bad at school. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And that's when I started in door-to-door. And door-to-door has changed my life. It's changed my wife's life. It's changed my little boy's life. And it will change his kid's life as well. It's how much of an impact it's had on me. But it hasn't always been easy. And I don't think it should be. Who's done solar for less than 3 months? Okay, a couple of you. So in the first 3 months, guess how many power bills I got? And I treated this job serious. I went to school at like 8 in the morning till noon. I started knocking at 1, and I knocked till an hour after dark every day in St. George, Utah. For the first 3 months, guess how many power bills I got? I didn't get a power bill. Never got one for 3 months. I was donating plasma to pay for my food. I'd donate plasma 3 times a week because that's how often they let you do it, and they'd pay you like $50 or whatever it was. So that's how I was buying my food. That's how I was covering my rent. I called Austin one day and I said, dude, I love you, but I've got to quit this job because I got to go get a real job. I got to go get something that pays me. And he said, hold on to the rope a little bit longer, and he hung up. Shit, all right. The next day, I knock on this lady's door, and her name was Cherie Delaney. She was like this 40-year-old mom, and she's pretty hot. She's in a bikini top. Like, shit. If I could sell anyone, it's going to be Cherie Delaney. She's from Hawaii. I didn't sell anything. She asked for solar. She's like, I had solar on my house in Hawaii. Do you, like, that's what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. She's like, I want it. I'm like, hell yeah. We end up selling Cherie Delaney, and we put panels on her house, and it changed my mindset forever. Changed my mindset forever. I just turned this door in Washington, Utah. I just changed this door on a street into actual cash. Makes absolutely no sense. I talked about Ponzi schemes earlier. That's what this door where I didn't do anything for. We only signed paperwork, and she said, I'll get solar. I didn't work with my hands. It didn't take me hours, and they paid me real ass American dollars for it. How often do we sit and think about that? It's crazy to me. I never knew anyone that did sales. I never in my whole life knew anyone that did sales. I also never knew anyone that made actual real ass money. Okay? So it changed my perspective on life forever. And then after that, my first year in door-to-door, I made $13,000. That's it. I had 3 months where I didn't even get a power bill, so the numbers kind of relate. And then every year, the income's doubled or tripled or quadrupled, and now the job's not about the money. The job's about the people. It's about the people that I can give solar to. I installed a house not too long ago in Henderson, and her name's Linda McKeon. She's able to save $50 a month on her power bill, and she's absolutely stoked out of her mind because she can put that money towards her groceries, and she can eat a little bit better now. That's what this job's about for me, right? That's what this job's about for me. Lee asked me to talk a little bit about extreme ownership. I saw this book right here. Who's read it? If you haven't read it, my homework for you is go buy it. If you don't have the money to buy it, text me. I'll send you some money so you can go buy it. Get the hard copy and read this book. It'll change your life, okay? Who knows what extreme ownership is? What's the premise, or what does it mean? Everything in our life that we do is because of us. Is that a different thought than the world has right now, though? The world's thought is everything is happening to me. I don't control anything. And that is 100% wrong. We have control of everything. And if we have extreme ownership, we take responsibility for everything that happens to us. So as a setter, if you go out and you bagel on a day, whose fault is that? Misty's because she sucks and she didn't train you well enough? Maybe she's horrible at training. Is it her fault? No, it's not her fault. It's your fault, right? And you have control over whether you do that tomorrow or not. This one is, and this is my biggest tip in extreme ownership as you guys are doing this job. If you can set a schedule and have extreme ownership towards that schedule, you'll make incredible money. You'll make incredible money. Is this job physically demanding? You walk down the road, you knock on the door, this guy says F off, okay, you walk to the next door. I could do that I could literally do that for days and days and days, and I wouldn't get tired. Yeah, you might sweat, but you're not going to die from it. It's not physically demanding. What is the hard part of this job? You point at your head. Why? Because this guy that told me to F off, now it gets me down, and now no one in Vegas wants solar, and now solar sucks, and now it's actually really hot. It's hotter than it was before I knocked the guy's door because he told me to F off, and now I'm dehydrated, and now I really have to pee even though I'm dehydrated, so I better walk to the gas station. Who's had those thoughts? You're all lying if you didn't raise your hand. We've all had them. That's the hard part of this job, 100%. So what do I mean by set a schedule and stick to it? What I mean is you set a schedule, and I start knocking at 1 p.m., and I don't stop knocking till 9 o'clock. And what does that mean? That means I'm in neighborhood before 1, and I'm knocking my first door by 1 o'clock, and I don't stop knocking till 9 p.m. Okay, and we're going to get open and vulnerable. Who has done that this week? I'm sure you guys all have knocking hours and schedules. Who has stuck to it 100% this week? You have?
Yeah, I've stuck to my schedule.
Okay, and that's great. And the extreme ownership part is if you haven't, you're probably not seeing the results you want to see. So if you want to make great money in this job, set a schedule and stick to it. Do I think your schedule needs to be starting at 8 a.m. and going till 8 p.m.? Absolutely not. This job gives you the ability to build a life and to sell solar, and it's all one giant package. Do I think you should miss your kid's birthday because you are only knocking? No, it makes you a bad dad, right? Do I think you should be able to do both? Absolutely. So that's my number one thing I would say is set a schedule and stick to it and have extreme ownership to that, not to Misty and not to Lee and not to anyone else, but to yourself. And if you can do that, you will be great at this job because it takes speaking to customers to sell solar. I don't know if you guys know that. The gas station, you don't actually sell very many solar accounts. Or walking down the street, you don't sell very many. It's actually being belly to belly and speaking to customers. It's my number one thing is if you guys set a schedule and then stick to it no matter what. Part of that is if you're going to be out of town Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, do I think you should think about knocking doors Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday? No. You scheduled it out on Sunday, and I know Lee and Misty are huge on Sunday planning. If it's in the schedule of I'm out of town and I'm being a dad, well, go be a dad. But all the other days, you better be on the doors when you told yourself you're going to be on the doors, and you better stick out till you said you were going to go home. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's extreme ownership. The next one I want to talk about is discipline equals freedom. This is something that we don't see a lot, and it's something that a lot of people think is a myth because they kind of sound like they contradict a little bit. Discipline equals freedom. So who knows what that means? If you set a schedule and you know your knocking hours are from 2 to 7 p.m., and that's what they are every day, how many actual hours is that? 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. 5 hours. How many hours are there in a day? 24. So how many hours do we have in the rest of the day to do whatever the hell we want? 19. That's what discipline equals freedom means, right? But what we do a lot of times is we don't show up to the doors on time, then we go to the gas station, then we take a phone call from our mom, and then we realize I should have been knocking for 2 hours and I've only knocked 3 doors, so then I'm going to try to knock a little bit later, and then my wife's pissed at me because I got home late, and now you don't have freedom or discipline. It's just a mess, right? So that's what discipline equals freedom means in this job, okay? And I'll show you something that's actually really cool. Who thinks a budget is super, not fun to have a budget with your money? It's definitely not fun, but I'll show you right here. Discipline equals freedom. It's really easy to look at with money. What I do with my money is I find the things that are important for me and to my family, and I budget for those things, okay? And I take all the thought out of it, and I'll show you the freedom it allows, okay? Let's take a budget of what does the average setter at Legacy make? Let's take $6,000, okay? What is that over the course of the year? 70K? 72. 72K? Okay, so let's say what's important to me is I've got bills that I've got to pay, okay? Well, let me back up a little bit. A lot of people with their money, they just earn their money and then they just shell it all out and they give it, and at the end of the month they're like, holy shit, I don't have any money. Because they have no discipline with it, which rewards you with no freedom. I'm going to tell you, if you do this job and you don't ever have the fun parts of it where you take your wife on a trip to the Philippines or buy a rental property or buy a cool car, the job kind of sucks. So I'm going to teach you how to have some fun with this job. So let's just say it's $6,000 a month. So it's $6K a month. Let's say you take that $6,000 in, you got to pay your bills, you got to do all these things, and at the end, there's no money left over. I'll show you how discipline equals freedom ties to dollars, okay? What's important to me is I've got to pay my bills, okay? Let's say my bills each month are $3,000. They're $3K, so 50% of my $6,000 paycheck goes towards paying my bills. And this is hypothetical, right? What else is, somebody else give me something that's really important to them that they want to dedicate money to. Investing, okay? Stock market, buying rental properties, whatever you want to do, okay? So let's say that's 10% of your income. So what's 10% of $6,000? Let me just do mine. One for me is giving back. It's really important to me. I dedicate 10% of all the income I earn in 1 year to give back. Austin and I run a huge charity event where we raise money every year. We run it in the Christmas time so kids can have food over Christmas. But 10% of all the income that I earn, it goes towards giving back, okay? If you don't budget for it, how often do you give back? Never, right? So let's say 10% goes here. What's that, $600? What else? What's important? Experiences. That's huge for me, right? So let's say we got 50, 60, 70. Let's say this is actually 20% of your total income is going to go to that. How much is that? $1,200, okay? And what do we have left over? What percentage-wise? 10%. What are we going to put that 10% towards? Savings, okay, great. And that's $600, okay? And that's your savings account. I've got my bills covered. I know it's going to be covered. Okay, so I do all of this off of percentages. So next month, let's say you make $7,000 instead of $6,000, okay? What do? You do your percentages based off of 7K. It's going to spit out a number, whatever, we're not going to do that, right? Somebody do the math for me of $600. This is for my vacation account, $600 a month that I set aside times 12. Someone do that math for me? $7,200. Where can you go in the world for $7,200? Almost anywhere. And you can take your plus one. You can go to the Philippines for 15 days with your wife, and you can get massages every day, and you can eat caviar and grilled lobster and stay in the best resorts for $3,000. Well, because you were disciplined when that paycheck came in, you have a lot of freedom to go on a really cool trip. How much is in your giving account? $7,200. $7,200 at the end of the year. How many of us, when Christmas comes around and we know a family that doesn't have money for gifts for their kids, how many of us actually nut up and give it? For me, it's really easy because I have an account. It's called Giving, And if there's 100 grand in it, guess how much I'm giving before the end of the year? 100 G's, it's going to zero. I'm going to give it. It makes it really easy because I was disciplined when it came in. It gives me a lot of freedom on the back end. Does that make sense? We all want to invest. That's like this huge thing that the door-to-door industry talks about. How many people actually do it? Some do. Put 50 bucks in the stock market, whatever. How many are buying rental properties and how many are buying apartment complexes? Not very many is because they don't budget for it on the front end, okay? What did we put in the investment account? 10%, so we have $7,200, okay? What was this account? Oh, experiences, okay? So we have all this money, and that's what discipline equals freedom means, and we're not going to spend any more time on it. But that's what it means for me in dollars. That's what it means for me in lifestyle. If you can be disciplined on the front end, it gives you a ton of freedom on the back end. That's what this job's been able to do for me. I take the job very seriously. I'm very disciplined. I try to spend all of my energy when I'm doing the job, giving 100%. So when I'm not doing the job, I can give 100% to being a dad or a husband or giving back, okay? So that's all I have for you guys today. I appreciate you letting me spend some time with you. Hopefully you found some value from something we shared, but that's all I have. Thanks, guys.